Global condemnation has gripped social media following a military coup in Myanmar in which senior officials from the ruling party, including de facto President Aung San Suu Kyi, were arrested. Matthew in the Cube has been following this. What more can you tell us, Matt?
Well, Alistair, online there has been one topic of conversation today, and that is Myanmar, after the military there staged a coup in which they detained the head of the de facto civilian government, Aung San Suu Kyi, other senior figures, and also announced a state of emergency to be put in place for 1 year. Today was the day when new members of the Myanmar parliament were due to be sworn in after November's elections which Aung San Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy won with a landslide victory. But in a statement released on Facebook by their communications team, the military in Myanmar has said that this move was necessary to, in their words, preserve stability in the country. They have also promised for free and fair elections to take place once this state of emergency has been lifted. But amongst this announcement, there was a lot of confusion, and that was largely because we saw internet connectivity and telecommunications outages across Myanmar. NetBlocks noting that around 8 o'clock local time, internet connectivity fell to around 50% of normal levels. That initially led to a lot of UN Special Rapporteurs for Human Rights expressing their concerns about what they said was an ominous situation in the country. And in the hours since, we've seen a lot of condemnation from EU leaders, the likes of the European Council President Charles Michel, who on Twitter called for a release of all those people who had been detained, strongly condemning the military coup, saying that the outcome of those elections in November must be respected and that the democratic process must be restored. It's worth also noting that EU institutions haven't actually named Aung San Suu Kyi in their statements of condemnation. She has recently been criticised by institutions for a perceived lack of action and almost acceptance of the mistreatment of the Rohingya minority Muslims in Myanmar. It was actually in September 2020 she was sanctioned and stripped of the list of Sakharov Prize winners for democracy for her actions relating to the Rohingya Muslims. But across the board, Alistair, we've seen a lot of condemnation from EU officials, summed up perhaps by EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell, who said that Myanmar's people want democracy and the European Union is standing by them through this unrest.
Matthew, thanks very much. Well, for more analysis on this, I'm joined now from Washington, D.C. by Murray Hebert, who's a senior associate at the Centre for Strategic and International Studies. Thanks very much for joining us on Euronews tonight. It's always been an uneasy relationship between Aung San Suu Kyi and the military. Are you surprised that this has happened?
No, I mean, it looked like it was going to happen over the last few weeks. There had been just, but as you say, the tensions really began way back when she first was elected. Her party first won the landslide. She was hoping to be president, but of course she couldn't because of the Constitution. Then in the parliament, she constantly or quite frequently raised the issue of changing the Constitution. That would allow her to run and would, as president, and would reduce the role of the military in the parliament and in the three ministries they control. However, once she won the election by a landslide, it's pretty clear that the military was nervous that she may again try to change the Constitution, and this time she may almost have the 3/4 needed to do that.
What about the international reaction? We heard some of it there, and yet Aung San Suu Kyi did lose a lot of credibility over the Rohingya question and human rights. What kind of measures, if any, do you think are going to come internationally?
Well, that's a good question. Yes, there has been a lot of international condemnation, a lot of criticism, because Myanmar, in a sense, was in recent years like a sort of an example of a country moving from a military dictatorship to a more democratic regime. However, she has also been criticized, as you say, because she did stand up to the military over the Rohingya issue. What can be done? It's really difficult. Myanmar, the military has lived under sanctions for their previous coups for decades, and it didn't seem to have much impact on them. It just kept the country poor and impoverished. There are already some sanctions by some European countries, countries, and the Americans over the Rohingya atrocities in 2017 and 2018. But I guess the international community could go a little further and sanction some of the military's companies. But in the end, there's also a competition between China and the international community for the hearts and minds of the souls for Southeast Asia. And it's difficult to imagine that if Myanmar gets sanctioned again, it won't turn increasingly to China for economic and political support.
So, despite this sort of semi-experiment with democracy over the last decade or so, given the military have done this and gone this far, do you see anything that can dislodge them now in the foreseeable future?
It would be terribly difficult. Sanctions are only going to have minimal impact, have no impact on the top leaders. Um, Condemnation doesn't seem to hurt. They did want to be part. The military agreed to do this democratic experiment because they wanted to join the international community and get investment. So maybe ultimately, in the end, it'll have a little impact if foreign companies aren't interested. But now, in the middle of COVID, there's not that much interest by foreign companies anyway in going to Myanmar, a very, very difficult economy with not enough rules and laws and officials who can ultimately manage foreign investment.